Call the Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Chairman, can I first of all say that it's a real pleasure to be supporting this legislation, and I would particularly commend to the current government and the incoming government after the election that we end each week on a bill that has more bipartisan agreement or across a party agreement than ones that end as going up. No, I'm not promoting singing together. I'm not in any of those parties, but I do think it's a good note on which to end the week. I want to commend the member who's just resumed his seat and thank him for his chairing of this legislation, but at the same time, as that genuine acknowledgement, can I express my frustration with him that he insists on trotting out the party line, and I think it's about time that he moved on from that and recognised that there are some parts of this legislation that are deficient, that are improved by the supplementary order papers that have been promoted by two of my colleagues, Lynn Pillay and Jacinda Ardern, and that we should be above politics, probably in a lot of areas, but none more so than in the area of this Parliament being united against family violence. Mr Speaker, I also want to express some frustration that we had a new bill introduced and referred to a select committee and now spending the time of Parliament, when actually we have a better bill already on the order paper, and that's the Domestic Violence Reform Bill introduced by my colleague Annette King, the Honourable Annette King, when she was Minister of Justice in 2008. That was a bill that is broader than this legislation, is stronger than this legislation, is more robust, more credible internationally than this legislation, but more importantly, would do more to protect particularly our children who are in homes where they might be subject to violence. How could anyone not want to do the most possible to protect children? But here we have the government saying, well, Labour introduced that, so we're going to do something different and we don't care if it's weaker. I think that's a poor position, and I challenge the Minister who's sitting in the chair to defend doing something less than is possible, to defend weakening an existing piece of legislation that is before a select committee. I personally don't think it's credible. I want to talk a bit about the background to that 2008 legislation introduced by the Honourable Annette King, because it had a very unusual background, and it's one that I don't recall having discussed in this House before. I was Minister for Social Development and Employment at the time, and I had convened a cross-all-parties group. One person from each party was invited to join this group to look at how we could make families safer in New Zealand. It occurred to me, as Minister of Social Development, that this was an area where party politics probably was irrelevant and where every party would want to say, we'll contribute. We had a very diverse group of representatives. We started off just for a couple of meetings having the now Honourable Judith Collins. She didn't stay for very many meetings, just two she attended on behalf of the National Party, much to my sadness that the National Party weren't represented after that. We had the Honourable Heather Roy from the ACT Party. Everyone knows Heather Roy's views. You won't die wondering what she thinks about. And sitting next to her was Sue Bradford from the Green Party. Can you imagine people, two women, with more diverse views than the Honourable Heather Roy and Sue Bradford? I can't, actually. They're pretty poles apart. On this issue, they both put every amount of effort and attention and passion into contributing, and found that actually they and all the rest of our group had much more in common than we had to divide us, and I think that was a very good thing. The Honourable Tariana Turia was the representative from the Māori Party, and when she was not able to attend, the Honourable Peter Sharples was the representative. Judy Turner from United Party was their representative, and Barbara Stewart from New Zealand First. So every party in Parliament except National said, this is so important, we'll give our time and our effort to contributing to policy development. From that committee came the basis of the domestic violence legislation. The Honourable Annette King gave our group a commitment to not progress through even a cabinet committee, let alone cabinet, any proposals until they had been, Mr Chairman, until those proposals had been looked at by this multi-party group. We had justice officials coming in, we had social development officials coming in, we had members of the community and voluntary sector who are involved in delivering many of our family violence prevention programs. We had a whole range of experts giving us information, and then we gave the Honourable Annette King our views on what should be in the domestic violence legislation, and the draft came to our multi-party group before it went to a Cabinet committee. That's pretty rare, Mr Chairman, and I think it's a very good model. That is the bill that is now, because of the National Party's petulance, childish behaviour, immaturity, inability to see above their own party so-called superiority, with the arrogance that the Honourable Jonathan Coleman has turned into an art form. That is the bill that multi-party group developed that is now languishing on the bottom of the order paper. Mr Chairman, we haven't put all of the missing bits of that legislation in as supplementary order papers to this legislation, but perhaps we could have, just to reinforce the point. But I urge the Honourable Nathan Guy to look at the two SOPs that we have put in and take them seriously, because the aim is to improve the bill, not to the standard of the domestic violence legislation that's on the order paper, but at least make some small improvements. The other areas that have been omitted that are in the domestic violence reform bill include the definition, as Chester Burrows pointed out, the definition of the child and the age. We've had some pretty tragic situations where people who should have been classed as children have been classed as adults, and I don't see any reason at all why we would want that sort of a thing to occur to a young person. The difference in response to a person who isn't of adult mental capability and someone who is should be at the heart of a police and justice response, and it can't be while we have that age differentiation. Our bill, the Domestic Violence Reform Bill, also had a provision that required any judge who declined a without notice application for a protection order to provide written reasons for declining that application. So the applicant would then be able to decide whether to proceed on notice. That's a really important part of understanding judicial decisions, and it's just been omitted from this. There's no logic at all for that provision to be omitted, but it is. Our bill also had provisions for applicants to be able to attend information sessions so they could get advice on making effective use of protection orders, provide advice on any social assistance that may be available. So practical help to people who are in the situation where they're being affected by domestic violence. The National Government's bill doesn't have any provision of the court to deal with the power to direct attendance to addiction assessment and treatment program. Our bill gave the family court that power. Everyone in this House understands the relationship between drug and alcohol and dysfunctional family situations. We should be doing everything we can to engage people who are addicts of either drugs or alcohol the right path into support. Our legislation, Mr Chairman, empowers the family court to appoint a lawyer to represent the interests of a child in a broader range of circumstances than is currently the case. Our bill also offers better protection and provision around applications for discharge of protection orders and allowed the court to order reports if necessary. Those are the improvements that could be made to this legislation if the National Party had the inclination to put aside their party politics and say, let's get the best legislation possible. So I'd really urge them over the coming hours as we go through the committee stages to consider those potential improvements. We should be able to do the best possible job that we can as a parliament to make our children's lives safe. And Mr Chairman, despite the failings, the legislation does do a number of important things, and I don't want to diminish in any way the respect that I have for the introduction of this legislation, but I do have to make the comment that it could well have been better, Mr Chairman.
Call Sue Moroney.
Chair.